Hey everybody, Jake here for American Trucks, and in this video we're taking a look at the PowerStop Performance Front Brake Calipers in red, fitting 2009 to 2018 Ram 2500 and 3500s. Brakes are a place on your truck where you should always get the best stuff you can. And your calipers are of course a key part of how your braking system performs. So if you find your truck's calipers are lacking in grab or stopping power, or they just need to be replaced, this setup from braking giant PowerStop will get you some more stopping power and will make a great replacement for worn out stock units. These don't require any modifications to fit, they provide you with a nice pop of color too, and they're gonna cost you a lot less than a replacement from Mopar. It happens more often than we care to admit. Your calipers just give up, they start leaking, or more commonly, they get stuck, or they might just not be putting out the clamping force that you need, so stopping can quickly become a large problem. And stopping is obviously quite important, especially if you're hauling or towing a lot of stuff in or behind your truck. Now these calipers from PowerStop are designed as a direct replacement for your stock calipers. So they're the exact same type of 2-piston floating caliper as your original ones, and they're gonna work with factory brake pads, which means that running costs will be low. It'll be easy to get new pads when you need them. Plus these come right out of the box, already finished in this nice bright red, so you've got some added protection for the caliper itself and a nice pop of color for your wheel well. So it's gonna save you having to do that part yourself. But the most important thing here is that at the end of the day, these are brand new calipers. All of the seals are fresh, new, premium EPDM rubber, so you've got a nice extended lifespan, and they're gonna be all sealed up nice and tight to avoid any issues with pressure or leaks. Now these are also already inspected and pressure tested as well before they ship out, so you can be certain that they're gonna work right the first time. And of course, they're gonna look good for a long time as well, thanks to that high heat red electrostatic finish here that we see. And they come ready to bolt on, making for a pretty simple installation. You also get new bleeders, new slide pins, everything. These again are a ready bolt-on solution that you can just take and put right on your truck. Pricing for this set will come in at about $300, which is a really good price considering the fact that just one caliper from Mopar will cost you nearly as much. So if you want or need new calipers, or even if you just want the easy button solution to getting some red calipers on your truck, this is a great way to get them for a fraction of the cost of OEM equivalents. Installation gets a 2 out of 3, and the job should take you about 3 hours to complete. Now, we talked a lot about the fact that these are going to be a bolt-on replacement for your stock ones, so there's no modifications required. However, replacing calipers will require you to bleed the brake system, as you are opening up those hydraulic lines, so air is going to get in. So that means you're going to either need a friend to help you, or you're going to need to get a brake bleeder tool. Either way, it's not a terrible job, just one that's going to take you some time. With that though, let's hand things over to one of our AT customers who's going to walk you through the install process.
Breaker bar, size 13/16 socket, size 17 socket, size 16 socket, size 24 socket, set of ratchet wrenches, size 11 open socket, size 13 open socket, adjustable wrench, flashlight, T-wrench or Allen wrenches in hose clamp, flathead screwdriver, impact wrench, brake compression tool or caliper compression tool, brake part cleaner, brake fluid, driver's side caliper and bracket, passenger side caliper and bracket, brake hoses. There's a passenger, there's a driver's side brake hose and passenger side brake hose. You also need to replace the washers, and you'll need to replace the brackets for the pads. We got a project for you today. We're going to be changing this 2014 Ram 2500 Heavy 6.4. We're going to be changing both the front driver and front passenger brake caliper and caliper bracket, as well as the brake hoses and the banjo bolts for both sides. The first thing you're going to need is a nice smooth flat surface to park the vehicle on. So in our case, we're using our garage, which is nice and flat. You're also going to need a jack to be able to lift the vehicle, and some supporting jack stands to keep the vehicle supported. You'll also want a set of shocks so that you can block opposite wheels, the wheels that are still on the ground, to prevent inadvertent rolling or shifting of the vehicle. And that's just an additional safety precaution. You also want to put on your emergency brake on the vehicle. One other note is that although we're changing a 2014 Ram 2500 brake calipers, make sure that your jack stands are for your weighted vehicle, because it is weight rated, okay? All right, let's go ahead and get to it. Now, when you take your tire off, you can use your tire here. Also put the tire underneath the vehicle. This just adds some additional protection. Anything happens, you got some support there. I'm gonna give you a little time. All right, guys, since we are removing the caliper pins and the caliper bracket, we're removing all of this, right? We're also removing the banjo bolt. I'm actually going to use some PB Blaster. This will help us remove frozen or rusted parts easily. So you just spray a little bit on there, spray some on around the bolts that you're removing. It'll penetrate, and then it'll make it easier for you to remove these components. So I'm gonna do that. And then the next thing we're gonna do is, anytime you're working around the wheel hub brake area, you want to spray the area with brake cleaner, and you want to do that very liberally because it can be harmful for you. So just spray brake part cleaner pretty much all over this area to clean it out a little bit and prevent a lot of dust from flying up in the air. You can also use a bristled brush to clean around these parts if you want to maybe reuse something, but in our case, we're actually swapping everything out. So let's go ahead and we're gonna put the PB Blaster first. We're gonna let it penetrate, and then we'll go ahead and use the cleaner. All right, PB Blaster coming in. All right, guys, we let that sit for a little bit. Now we came back. We're about to spray some brake cleaner liberally again, all around the pad, all the area that we're going to be working on. This is the camera. All right. You also want to have a ventilated area for this. All right, everyone, so we let that penetrating PB Blaster get in there into the bolts. Now we're gonna start removing. We're gonna start by removing the caliper pin bolts. There's two, one here, one at the bottom. All right, everyone, we let our penetrating PB Blaster get into the bolts. And so now we're going to start to remove them. We're gonna start with the caliper pins, and we're gonna use a size 16 socket. Now, when you're doing a brake job and you just want to change the brakes, you have to still remove the caliper. You can actually reuse them. If you're going to reuse them, you want to make sure that you're holding down these guide pins so that you don't inadvertently damage the seal that you find on both sides here. In my case, I'm actually replacing this, so I'm just going to remove it as is. Might need a little bit of room here. Oh, all right. All right, let's go ahead and take that pin out. Now I'm gonna shift the camera to the bottom pin, and you can actually see this bottom caliper pin come off. All right, and use the same socket to remove this bottom caliper pin here. And you can see this. Just moving the camera there. Get a good angle. Alright, once it's loose, it comes off pretty easy. There we go. Alright guys, so now what we want to do is we want to pry the caliper off. We're just going to use a screwdriver for this. Alright, you just insert your screwdriver in between the caliper and the bracket, and you tap it just lightly. You'll notice it starts popping off. It might be very stuck in there if you haven't removed it before. I removed these a while back when I did a break, maybe a couple months ago. So just want to be careful of not damaging the pads if you're planning to reuse them or if they don't require a change. They also sell and have they also have a compression tool that you can use to insert between the caliper and the pads that allow you to remove it a little bit easier. All right, the caliper is loose. Now what we want to do is we want to place this up here. I'm going to throw in a little bit more of the brake part cleaner. All right guys, as we can see, the caliper has now been removed. We need to remove the banjo bolt here and the hose. But before doing that, because that will start the, it'll drip a little bit of brake fluid while we do that. What we're gonna do next is we're actually gonna remove the caliper bracket. So there's another bolt up here and one at the bottom. You can hang this out of your way using special hanger. I don't have a hanger, so I'm custom making one from just a regular clothes hanger. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hang this up here. All right guys, now we're gonna get the camera in here. Kind of hung the caliper out here out the way. It's in a weird position, but again, we're not reusing this hose or anything else. So we're just going to inspect these. And we're gonna remove. All right, everyone. All right, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna remove the caliper bracket bolts. You have one up here and one down here. The caliper bracket bolts are gonna use a size 24 for removal. And I'm actually gonna use a breaker bar because it's very difficult to remove those on this truck. And you can see there where the bolt is. This is very tight. All right, we're gonna go ahead and remove these bolts. We have one up here, one down here, size 24 socket. I'm actually running into some difficulty. So what I'm gonna do is on my breaker bar, I'm gonna add or extend the pole a little bit. See if with some additional force, I can take this guy out of here. That was pretty tight. All right, we got that one bolt there. Now we're gonna get the bottom one out. Same procedure. All right, now we're gonna remove this lower caliper bracket bolt here. It uses the same size socket 24. All right, now we're gonna remove the bracket by simply just pulling it off. All right, everyone, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna separate the caliper from the brake bracket using a size, the new one is size 17. So we'll use a size 17. You do wanna hold this guide here. I'm gonna use this open wrench. I didn't have a smaller wrench to use. Just be careful with the rubber boot here that you're not inadvertently damaging it while you rotate. All right, got that loose. Make sure you're gonna leave it there. So I remove the other side, same thing. So I'm lifting the caliper a little bit on the left hand side to release some of the pressure here. I'm gonna go ahead and remove these pin bolts. All right. And now what we want to do is we want to install the new hardware that came with the kit onto this bracket, and then we want to move the brake pads on over. If you're not going to replace them, if you need replacing, it might also be a good time. One other point of advice is it would have been better to remove the banjo bolt from the caliper that's currently on with the bracket on so that you have some support to remove the bolt. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this back out, and maybe you can edit the clip and put and show the removal of the banjo bolt. Let's go ahead and remove this brake pad. All right, guys, this one is actually a little bit stuck. So let's go ahead and, so guys, as a heads up, I ended up having to pry here. This pad is very stuck. And also I tapped a little bit on the left side. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna clean this out real good on both sides. Probably use a bristle brush to clean that out. We're also going to use more brake cleaner to clean both of these out. This one actually looks okay, it looks pretty good, but this one over here is kind of caked up, it looks like, maybe from heat. But anyways, we're gonna this is going away. We're gonna use a new hardware. You'll want to put some brake lubricant in these on this bracket guides, or the caliper guides. All right, all metal to metal contact points, you'll want to use a little bit of brake lubricant. You don't want to get this on the rotor or the pads themselves. You don't want to get it anywhere here. This is this section of the pad that caused your vehicle to stop. All right, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna install these new brackets, brake brackets or pad brackets on here. We're gonna add a little bit of lubricant on any metal parts. So wherever you have metal, you want to add a little bit of lubricant. Just be careful not to put lubricant on the pads themselves. You can put a little bit of lubricant down here. Again, any contact points with metal is a good area to put some lubricant on there. We're also going to clean the pads themselves. We're going to use a little bit cleaner, and we're going to use a wire brush, especially on this one, since it was the one giving me a little bit of problem. So I got this brake lubricant I reopened. I also have a little bottle here, or a little tube. I'm going to go ahead and start lubing this up. Doesn't need too much. I like to lube this up pretty good. And put it on here. Okay. All right. Got one. And really, you just need to lube that top section because the area that's gonna be moving is in here. And so you wanna make sure that that's lubed. I lube the bottom section because it lets me put these new ones in there a little bit easier. But you do want them to sit nice and tight on there. So if you're checking your pads for wear and tear, you know, you can reuse some of the stuff in there, but it's good to replace some of these. All right. We'll go ahead and now, because I have lubricant on my gloves, I'm actually gonna change these gloves when I go to put these pads on. All right, now that we got these little brackets back on, next step is to put the pads onto the bracket and take our hardware and go start bolting things back up. And then we're also gonna change the hose. All right, guys, we're back. Let's go ahead and clean this out a little bit. You'll notice the kind of ability for the brake pad to push back a little bit. You want to make sure that it can move freely. All right, so we got one brake pad in. Now we're gonna do the other. All right, guys, now we're gonna install this secondary pad. Just push in on one side, get it in there, and push in on the other side. Oh, I went too far. Got it. All right. So again, just want to observe the pad has some motion, right? I'm just going to use a little bit of brake cleaner. I'm going to wipe down the pads, make sure that I didn't inadvertently, you know, put any grease anywhere. We'll go ahead and install the bracket on the rotor. We'll leave it loose, but we just want to install it and then remove the rest of the caliper and the brake hose and install the new one. So we'll do that next. All right, everyone. I purposely left this step out because once I remove the banjo bolt, it's gonna start leaking a little bit of brake oil. So what I did was I put back just very lightly, doesn't have to be super tight, but I put back the bracket with the caliper on here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove this banjo bolt. I let it soak in a little bit to clean it out. And I'm going to remove the hose. Now, in order to do this, I want to add a collection pan down here because it will start dripping some brake fluid. One piece of advice is you could, before removing the bracket and the caliper, you could remove the banjo bolt. It would have just been leaking the entire time. Unless you put something to hold the brake down or you use a clamp like I showed as part of the tools. In my case, I didn't do that. So here we go. We're gonna remove this guy. Very simple. And all these bolts are now loose, so I can just take everything out. Once you remove the banjo bolt, it has the bolt, 2 washers. If you're just inspecting your brakes, what you can do is you can actually compress the caliper back in to prevent any sort of leaking. All right, here we go. Go ahead and take these bolts back off. This stuff is bad for paint, so try to keep it away from your paint job. You can also plug the line using like an earplug, stick it in there, and it'll stop from leaking. So Now the last piece is we want to remove the hose. So the hose is this right here. There is a bracket, like a little clip-on bracket that goes around your hose. So you'll want to remove that to loosen this. But before you do that, you'll want to loosen up the brake line, all right? The way we're gonna loosen that up is we're gonna use a wrench, open wrench. All right, everyone, we let the little bit of the brake fluid drip out here. What we're gonna do is we're going to loosen this nut with a size 13 wrench, and then we're gonna remove this bracket in order to take the hose out and install the new hose, okay? Just make sure you have your collection pan, because again, it will continue to drip. So, also this is your brake ABS line. Be careful with this hose. Just move it out your way. Well, you know when you'll know when you've loosened it up. It'll start leaking on you, and that's a good sign that you're close. All right, guys, so a good rule of thumb is when you remove this bracket, there might be some rust up there. So the minute that you start seeing some leaking here, it means the hose is loose. So a good idea is remove the bracket, you tighten it up just a little bit, remove the bracket. Let's see if I still can't hand adjust it just yet. All right, guys, a quick rule of thumb is when you remove this, the brake hose will be exposed, and you don't want to get anything in there, right? So once you get this loose enough where you start to see even a small leak, it's a good time to start removing that that little bracket up there. That little bracket just sits there and holds the line, and you can remove it easily using a screwdriver or a little some pliers. All right, so the line is loose. I saw a little bit of leak there. Now I'm gonna remove that bracket. This is why I saved taking this line out for last. As you can see, you know, it's just leaking. Another thing that you want to do is don't leave this leaking because you can actually run out of brake fluid in the master cylinder, which would be very, very bad. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove this line. We're gonna set the new line back in here. We're gonna have it plugged. There's a little notch behind this. As you can see, once you start removing it a little bit, it'll come off nice and easy. It's not too difficult. All right, you are going to reuse this, so I'm gonna clean it using the wire brush again, using some brake cleaner. I'll go ahead, clean that out, and then we'll reuse it. Now we're going to remove, finish loosening up the line, and we're gonna remove the brake hose and install the new one. Right, you can see how that sits there. Now our brake line is loose. Let's go ahead and get our new brake hose installed. Be ready to go. Also, this is part of the ABS brake. You can remove these if you need a little bit of room and space. When you install the new line, you want to clip this on there so that it's not moving. Also, brake fluid is corrosive, so you want to clean all this out very good. Here's our new line. All right. Now, I should have mentioned this. The bracket that the line sits, it has it has a certain shape to it. So you can't put this on there incorrectly. The line will actually go right into that shape, which is like this. And it'll go all the way into the bracket. This ensures that when you bring in your brake hose, it's easy to just install, right? So you're just gonna bring in the brake hose down, and then you'll install it on the caliper like this, allowing this kind of motion to occur freely. But this ensures that the line kind of just comes down easily. So make sure that it's completely in there. Once it's in there, go ahead and start to thread this back. I've seen situations where folk actually move this hose up and then start to push it in, but would not recommend that. All right, I went ahead and moved the camera so that you can see an overhead view of what the bracket looks like where the brake hose goes. There's actually an arch on one side, and the brake hose will have an arch as well. And so you need to insert your brake hose correctly onto this bracket. All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and install the hose. You'll notice the shape that we just looked at, it's only on one side for the hose. So you should be able to get that right in there. All right. And it needs to sit nice and flush. Once it sits flush, you know, okay, I got the hose inserted correctly there. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna screw that back in with our open wrench. All right, guys, we got that hose on there. We're able to thread it back in. These parts are, you don't want to over threaten this or over thread this. So you want to be, once you get this nice and tight, you want to clean it up, make sure it's not dripping, but don't overdo the brake parts. And once it's completely threaded, then you want to put that clip back on that holds the hose in place. All right, right there, it's sitting pretty tight at this point. So what I want to do is I want to clean this line up. I'm going to use some brake cleaner in and around this area to clean it up. It's sitting pretty tight. And then I'm going to put the clip in and tie my ABS line back to the support. All right, we got the brake hose on the brake line. Now we're going to reattach this clip, and it's actually very tight in here. So what we're gonna try to do is we're gonna try to lightly tap it with a hammer, and it should slide in. All right. She went in pretty easily there. Went in pretty easy. Just did a light tapping, got it in there, so we're good. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we got the hose, the brake hose line on here. I'm gonna go ahead and finish attaching the ABS brake line to it. Reinstall the bracket, and then we'll install the caliper, all right? Let's go ahead and reinstall the bracket. We're gonna reuse the bolts from the bracket. All right, we got the lines back. We got the brake hose attached back to the line. We got the clip back on. We put our ABS attached here. Now we're gonna install the bracket and then put the new caliper in. So we got our prepped bracket already from earlier. We're gonna go ahead and slide that guy in. Just find the bolts where it attaches. I'm gonna reuse the same bolts. Bolts are good. Now to keep the, it's kind of, I want to keep this in here tight. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna temporarily set a lug nut just so that it's holding the rotor in place and the rotor's not kind of creating pressure for me as I'm tightening these bolts. All right, we got the bracket on. We haven't fully tightened the bolts yet. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put the caliper on now, and we're gonna use new bolts. Go ahead and set the hose to the side for a second. Slide this guy in. Put the new bolts in there. All right, bottom one. There we go. Now the brake hose might seem kind of odd, but it sits in here like this, okay? So what we're gonna do is you need a washer on both sides of the banjo bolt, and we are replacing the banjo bolt. So this is the new banjo bolt. The old one was rusted and pretty caked up inside as well. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this out and reinstall the banjo bolt in there, and we should be ready to go. All right, now we got that brake bracket. We got the caliper in place. Again, these are still loose. We're gonna tighten them in a second. We wanna put this banjo bolt on. To do that, you need a washer on one side, like so. You're gonna put this on here, onto the hose, and then you're going to install the other washer. It does require a little bit of play to sit there correctly. So now that we got the banjo bolt on there, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our 15mm socket and start turning it in play here. All right, so once you get to this point, there should be no more leaking from either your brake hose or your banjo bolt or anywhere. So this is a good time to clean everything up and maybe lay out a towel or so. Use the towel test. If you see that the towel is wet, it means that there's a leak. We're gonna use brake cleaner to clean all of this. And then once we are completely done, we have to tighten the bolts for the bracket and the caliper. And lastly, we have to bleed the brakes. So we'll walk through what that process looks like. All right, guys, I moved the camera a little bit, so hopefully you got a better view from this angle here. I just wanted to point out that I didn't talk about the specifications for these. So the banjo bolt is 20 foot-pounds torque. The caliper pins, they are 24 foot-pounds, and then the bracket bolts are 275 foot-pounds. So the banjo bolt and the caliper pins are very simple to use. Remember that in this aftermarket caliper, the size for the caliper pin is actually a size 17 socket that we're gonna use, and the banjo bolt is a size 15. So you could use a digital torque wrench to get the right specifications if you don't have a good feel for the force, but you don't really need it for these two. For the larger one, it is recommended. I am using my breaker bar as well as the cheater bar, which is a large pole extended to it, which gives me a lot much leverage, and I'm able to pull more force that way. So I'll just show you what that looks like. Once I tighten this, I'll change the angle and you'll be able to see. All right. So I got it tight a little bit there. All right. I'm gonna move to the top one. All right, those want very nice and tight. And now what I'm gonna use, to finalize that, I'm actually going to use my breaker bar in conjunction with a cheer bar. So I'm essentially just using this pole. It's just a kind of like a pipe fitting of some sort that I've had, and I'm just going to use it in conjunction with my wrench here, and that gives you a lot more leverage, allowing you to apply additional force. So I'm gonna move the camera, see if I can get in here. All right, yeah, it's tight there, extremely tight. And you want it to be tight. There's a lot of pressure here. All right, that looks good. Now we're gonna take our size 17 socket, finish off the caliper pins. Remember, on the new caliper pins, you wanna use a backup wrench to hold that pin guide so that it's not turning on you. So I'm gonna switch here 1 second. All right, you could just use an open wrench. In my case, I'm using an adjustable wrench. I actually damaged one of my other wrenches, so I'm going to just hold it. And again, you don't need to apply pressure on the wrench or anything. You do need to apply pressure on your socket, as all you want to do is prevent it from moving as much as possible. All right, now I'm having a challenge getting in here. This hose is flexible, so you should be able to move in there. Just wiggle it a little bit. All right, here we go. You can use a power tool to start this process for it as well. Just make it a lot easier. All right, this looks good. You should have some wiggle room with your caliper, right? Let's get this guy in there as well. All right, here we go. Again, you want 24 foot-pounds. That should be good. Inspect these always, and I'm gonna just double check the pressure of the banjo bolt, since I'm pretty much done here. Again, this guy should be about 20 foot-pounds. Now that everything's tightened, it's a lot easier to make sure this is tight where it needs to be. And that's pretty good. It did a little turn. All right, guys, so we have now finished tightening our caliper bracket, our caliper, and our banjo bolt, and we make sure that everything was good, nice and tight. We also checked the fitting of the hose and the bracket over there. So this last step, you'll notice I took this little plastic cap off. We're going to open that bleeder valve to do two things. We're gonna flush out some of the brake fluid, and in the process, we're also going to remove air from the brake, the brake lines and the caliper. So by opening this valve out, letting some fluid out, you'll start to see some bubbles. The bubbles are the air escaping, and so we want to let out as much air. And you also want to see and watch that both of your pistons move up a little bit closer into the brake pad itself, because that's what's going to, in the future, help stop the vehicle, right? You press the brake, the piston pumps out, and both of the brake pads help slow down the rotor. So let's I'm gonna set up the line. I am working with a partner to do this piece. There's two methods. One is you do it yourself with kind of like a vacuum pump that applies pressure while you're pulling at the same time brake fluid. The other aspect is you open the bleeder valve, you have someone step on the brake, you'll see the fluid in the bubbles come out, and then you close the bleeder valve. So let's show you what that looks like. All right guys, so now that we've put it back, the bracket, the caliper, as well as the banjo bolt and the hose, everything's tight. We got all the lines, everything going. Now what we want to do is we want to bleed the calipers. Before you do a job like this where you're bleeding brakes, it's a good idea to figure out where your vehicle is in terms of maintenance, because it might be an opportunity for you to completely flush all of your brake fluid. That's what I did for my truck. We're not covering that, but I will just briefly talk about how you do this bleeding process. In general, when you're bleeding the brakes, you want to start on the rear passenger tire, go through this process that we're about to show you. Then you want to go over to the driver's side passenger tire. Then you want to move to the front right passenger tire or driver passenger tire. And then you want to move to the front left driver tire. All right. So the process is very simple and straightforward. You take out this bleeder valve, you open this bleeder valve. So you take off the bleeder valve cover. So what we just took off is a small little plastic cover or silicone cover. Then you're going to open up the bleeder valve with a size 11 wrench. There's two ways you can do this. You can have a vacuum pump that you pump and it has pressure and you pull the liquid out, the brake fluid out. Or you can do a two-person method where you use a hose into a bottle, and as long as there's fluid in the bottle and the hose is reaching it, you can open up the valve, let some fluid out. And I'll show you what that looks like. Now I'm gonna use one person kit just to show you and demonstrate what it's like. When you change a caliper, you'll have to do this. If you notice, the caliper pistons are actually pushed in. That means there's no fluid in these in the first place. So you're gonna want to have a couple bottles of brake fluid ready. And as this gets filled, your reservoir will lower and you'll want to add brake fluid in it, okay? So I'm using this kit. I'll show you what that looks like. Very straightforward kit. You stick the hose into the bleeder valve. Then you're gonna open this. Now, if you got somebody helping you, you can have them pump the brake and hold, and then you open the bleeder valve. All right, and as soon as you open it, you'll start to see brake fluid coming out, as well as some bubbles. There's actually bubbles there. So you want to do this, and then once you get some of the bubbles out, you'll tell your partner to hold. You'll close the bleeder valve, and then they can let go of the brake. All right. Now in this case, I'm using a one-person kit. You can actually work some of this yourself, but I'm still gonna work with another person. You probably saw more bubbles coming out of there. You probably also saw the pistons move and shift a little bit. That's what you want to happen, right? You want these guys all the way out until they're touching your brake pad. You want all these bubbles out. What you'll do is you'll tighten the bleeder valve, and then your friend can let go of the brake. When you're ready to do it again, you'll say, you know, brake. they'll press the brake down, hold it in a steady position, and then you'll open the bleeder valve, let out the air, and then go through this process. Now with a very small bottle like this, it can take, this kind of kit can take a very long time. So what you'll want to do is get yourself a water bottle, Gatorade bottle, and just close it nice and tight. Drill a hole on top so that you can stick the hose all the way to the bottom, and then go through this process, and it'll allow you to go through the process a lot faster. So that's actually what I'm gonna do, but I just wanted to show you what this looks like. All right guys, I show you the method with the small one-person bleeder kit. What I'm going to show you now is when you're working with someone else, how you can do it. I have a bottle here. I actually using the same tube. I ran the tube all the way to the bottom. You'll actually see it. It's all the way at the bottom of the fluid here. And so now I'll open up this bleeder valve after someone has pressed down the brake a little bit and held it steady. I'll open up the valve. They'll continue to hold the brake. I'll close the valve after I see some bubbles and brake fluid come out. I'll ask them to ease up. They can pump the brakes again, and then we'll start the process over. And we'll continue this until everything is where we want it to be from a piston perspective, and then that we're not seeing any more bubbles in the system, all right? When you do this for the entire vehicle, let's say you are flushing the entire brake fluid, what you want to pay attention to is that your brake reservoir never goes empty. So you want to keep it over half, and you want to start at the rear passenger tire first, then the driver's side rear passenger tire, then the front passenger, so the front right tire, and then finally the front left tire, so the driver's side tire on the front. I'm actually wrapping this up with the front driver tire. So this is the last one here that we're doing. We're gonna go ahead and flush the, get the brake fluid into the pistons, make sure that the reservoir is up to, up to par where it needs to be, and then we are going to be good. And I'll let you know. I'm just gonna call it, I'll say brake, and then you press down. I'll say ease up, and then you let go, all right?
All right.
Brake. You probably felt it there.
Yeah.
Yep, give it a second. Did you press it down a little bit?
Yeah. Want me to do more?
A little bit more, yeah. Yep, more.
That's going to wrap it up here for our review and install of the PowerStop Performance Front Brake Calipers in red, fitting 2009 to 2018 Ram 2500 and 3500s. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, for all things Ram, be sure to keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.